And one of the thinkers who referred to Job is Kant, and it's perhaps in one of his lesser known essays. A lot of times we talk about his critiques, we talk about religion in the boundaries of reason alone, but we have his essay on the miscarriage of all philosophical trials in Theodicy, where he discusses the potentiality of theodical knowledge and to be able to present a theodicy. Can you perhaps summarize the argument for our viewers about Kant's perhaps usage of Job, but also the challenge towards theodicy that Kant provides in this essay?
Right. Yes, it's as you said, it's one of those works by Kant that is not as well known as his main works, the three critiques in particular. It's from 1791, so it's a relatively late work by Kant after the three critiques, and it's a short article, like a 20-page text. Of course, there would be other works by Kant that are highly important and relevant to these issues. The whole Kantian moral philosophy and philosophy of religion is obviously connected to these issues, and especially the concept of radical evil in Kant's Religionsschrift, religion within the boundaries of mere reason, which is also from the 1790s. But this short text, the so-called Theodicy essay, is the piece where Kant directly and explicitly deals with theodicies. And well, I guess we can say it has both a negative or critical and a positive or constructive part, and negatively it rejects or overcomes or claims to overcome not only all actual theodicies but all possible theodicies, like rational, speculative, theoretical theodicies, or he also uses the concept of doctrinal theodicies, and there he, like in the spirit of his general architectonics, he makes careful distinctions between different types of challenges regarding human reason and our concept of God, and then considers the theodicist attempts to respond to those challenges and rejects all the different theodicies he distinguishes. So although I don't think he even mentions Leibniz explicitly there, still we could see Leibniz's theodicy of the best possible world as being one of the targets of the criticism. But generally, as in Kant's critical philosophy, more generally, we can say that that the Theodicy essay targets all those attempts to claim to know something about the transcendent, about whatever divine reasons there might be for evil and suffering, or for, well, he uses the technical term counter-purposiveness in the world, Zweckwidrigkeit, and yeah. So in that sense, it's well in line, I guess we can say, with the critical philosophy, because any attempt to claim to know something about why God, if there is God, would have good reasons to allow suffering. All those attempts are firmly rejected, and then there is this other part where Kant turns to the Book of Job, which is kind of somewhat unusual for Kant to deal extensively with the biblical text. It's not a normal thing for Kant to do, I guess, and he considers this exchange with Job and the friends, and also Job's relation to God, and this kind of revolt, Job's revolt against God in the demand for justice and demand for explanation and justification, and he there emphasizes the idea that in the figure of Job, what is most important may be slightly neglected because the tradition, especially the Christian tradition of reading the book of Job, has so much focused on for example, Job's patience in suffering. In contrast to that, Kant emphasizes as Job's most important virtue his honesty and sincerity, Aufrichtigkeit, and like truthfulness, Wahrhaftigkeit. These are the kinds of words that he uses in the text, and so Job's sincerity, in the sense that he sticks to his view that he has not sinned, he hasn't done anything on the basis of which his suffering would be deserved in some big picture of things, like according to some divine reasons or whatever, and he rejects these friends' attempts to explain or justify from a kind of in a way from God's point of view why those sufferings take place, and he sticks to that. He doesn't accept any pseudo justifications, or in our terms any theodicies that might be put forward in order to justify what is happening to him, and there Kant says something like this is like the most important virtue that Job has, this inner truthfulness, and he speaks as he thinks, and not in the way the friends speak, who are like religious flatterers, in the sense that they try to explain why God might have good reasons to allow Job's suffering. And I guess by extension we could suggest that in the contemporary theodicy discussion, many of those thinkers who try to formulate theodicies, they in a way take the role of Job's friends instead of Job himself.
That's quite fascinating, and perhaps we can. I think there's two aspects I want to delve into here a bit more. There's the doctrinal side of his criticism of doctrinal theodicy, and his criticism of or his promotion of authentic theodicy in relation to Job. Perhaps when we think about Kant's criticism of doctrinal theodicy, there's of course the clear idea of his limitation of humans' ability to achieve some form of transcendental knowledge, some knowledge about God, and in that sense, the implications on theodicy are somewhat obvious. I guess you could think, okay, we cannot say much about what God is and God's relationship with evil. However, Kant also has an idea of God almost as a postulate. I was reading, I think, his essay on what it means to orient oneself in thinking, and he focuses very heavily on God as a postulate of moral knowledge, or embodiment of this kind of God demonstrates a possibility for morality to be embodied in reality in some sense. So I was wondering whether perhaps there's another approach to theodicy, or the implications that God as a postulate, instead of, I suppose, in classical analytic philosophy of religion, we look at God as this kind of abstract concept and compare him against evil, whereas if you view God as a postulate, it seems to fundamentally change the nature of God as God, perhaps as this external thing, to a different concept, and whether that change of God as a postulate impacts one's understanding of theodicy.
Yeah, I think that is an excellent question, and of course there is no consensus among interpreters of Kant regarding these issues. How exactly to understand Kant's account of the existence of God as a postulate of practical reason. In a way, everything begins from the rejection of our ability to know anything about God's existence or the immortality of the soul, for example. Those arguments are presented in the Critique of Pure Reason. and are part of Kant's theoretical philosophy, so to speak. But but as you know, when we move on to Kant's moral philosophy, practical philosophy, the critique of practical reason in particular, then what we have there is this peculiar doctrine of the postulates of practical reason, including God's existence and the immortality of the soul. And those are things that we need to postulate in order to be able to be fully committed or consistently committed to what the moral law requires us to be committed to, and in particular to pursuing what Kant calls summum bonum, the highest good, which is a kind of a harmony of moral virtue and happiness, which, as we know, does not really take place in this world, and in a way requires the postulation of both immortality and God. But of course, the important thing is that we cannot know anything about the reality of those things. They are, in a way, mere postulates, and something that our commitment to morality needs, but still morality binds us absolutely, and the moral duty, the moral law, the categorical imperative is absolute, independently of these postulates. So they are secondary to morality in that sense. Now, this is just a very, very brief and in many ways inaccurate summary of Kant's main ideas here. But regarding the theodicy discussion, I suppose the key question in this regard is whether these Kantian ideas of God as a postulate and the related concept of the highest good, the idea that in a way, in the long run, we can at least hope, although we cannot know, that moral virtue and happiness could somehow harmoniously, in the end, coincide. There is the question whether that in a way brings theodicy back to the picture, whether Kant is some kind of a theodicist after all, although he rejects these doctrinal or speculative theodicies in the Theodicy essay. He does call this this account that he finds in the book of Job, he does call it authentic theodicy. So Kant, of course, does not use the concept of anti-theodicy. In a way, he still thinks he is delivering a theodicy, although it's completely different from all the other theodicies there are, and rejects this kind of rationalizing theoretical project of theodicies, because they would go against the principles of critical philosophy. But it perhaps in my terms, or in the terms of the contemporary discussions, I would rather say that what we have in the Theodicy essay, including its references to the book of Job, is a kind of anti-theodicy, without, of course, that term being used. And we maybe slightly provocatively, we chose Kantian anti-theodicy as the title of the 2016 book you mentioned, the joint book by Sari Kivistö and myself, which in a way starts from Kant's account of the book of Job, and then expands that discussion to more recent philosophy and modern philosophy, and also literature. But I'm not sure if I answered your question about the postulate really, but it's a complex matter in Kant scholarship, and I want to be very careful in making strong scholarly historical claims about Kant or any other historical classics. I don't consider myself a professional Kant scholar in the strict sense, in which some people, I mean, there are people in the academia who dedicate their lives to studying Kant, and I'm not one of them, but I'm very deeply interested in Kant, and I do think that Kant is the absolutely decisive turning point in this whole discussion, and many people who write on evil and suffering seem to believe that Kant changes the picture in the sense that before Kant, this discussion was focused on the theoretical and metaphysical theological question. And in that sense, also focusing on theodicy. But after Kant, ethics in a way takes over, and the primary perspective on the problem of evil would be ethical rather than metaphysical. But of course, those are related, and we can. It's simplified to just put it in those terms. But I mean, people like Susan Neiman, for example, and others, Richard Bernstein, who have written important books on evil, they have also emphasized this crucial role played by Kant in the history of this problem.